Welcome to Unpacking Peanuts, the podcast where three cartoonists take an in-depth look at the greatest comic strip of all time, Peanuts by Charles M. Schulz.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. It's an exciting day in Unpacking Peanuts land. We have a special guest, Benjamin Clark, the curator of the Charles M. Schulz Museum and Research Center, is here with us to answer our questions. I know that it's that this is not allowed to be your favorite movie, but one of my favorite movies was Annie Hall, and there's a great scene in it where there's two people standing in line arguing about Marshall McLuhan. And the main character then goes, "Oh, really? Well, I happen to have Mr. Marshall McLuhan right here." And he pulls him out from behind a tree to make his point. Being friends with Benjamin Clark and knowing him a little bit through this podcast is like having Marshall McLuhan that you can just pull out and win any argument out. So it's very exciting to have him here with us today. And who are us? Well, I'm part of us, and I'm Jimmy Gownley. I'm a cartoonist. We are us. I did Amelia Rules, the dumbest idea ever. 7 good reasons not to grow up. Joining me as always are my pals, co-hosts, and fellow cartoonists. He's a playwright and a composer, both for the band Complicated People as well as for this very podcast. He's the original editor of Amelia Rules, the co-creator of the original comic book price guide, and the creator of such great strips as Strange Attractors, A Gathering of Spells, and Tangled River. It's Michael Cohen.
Say hey.
And he is the executive producer and writer of Mystery Science Theater 3000, a former vice president of Archie Comics, the creator of the Instagram sensation Sweetest Beast, and his new book, The Night Before Christmas, is out now. It's Harold Buchholz.
Hello.
Guys, it's so exciting that we have Benjamin Clark with us today.
Yes.
He is our first ever 2-time, actually a 3-time technically, depending on how you count it, guest. And I just am so excited he's here today. He's going to answer all our questions and just geek out with us about Charles Schulz and Peanuts. So welcome to the show, Benjamin Clark.
First off, how does it feel to be the first 3-time guest on Unpacking Peanuts? I mean, it's got to be an honor.
It feels fantastic. I love it. Triumphant. How about that?
So tell us what's going on in your world. What is happening at the Schulz Museum or Schulz brands internationally?
Oh my goodness. So much is going on all the time. We have a constantly rotating schedule of exhibitions here at the Schulz Museum here in Santa Rosa. So we have just recently opened an exhibition of originals only. It's in our strip rotation gallery, which is only originals. That's it. Very clean, spare kind of treatment in that gallery all the time. And I've done Evolution 1950s. So we're looking at the whole decade of the 50s in the originals and kind of the changes in characters and the developments and all kinds of stuff going on there. So
you think that's obviously, I guess, maybe it's not obvious. Is that the biggest decade of change, you think? I mean,
that is hard to argue. I don't know. It is big, but there are some things where, in our minds, you kind of hold the eras and you kind of think, well, that's like probably towards the end of the 50s. It's like, oh, actually, no, that's like 1960. Or
I was
that's
shocked.
Like 1956.
Yeah,
it's like 59, it's kind of, right. So yeah, it's like Snoopy on top of his doghouse is 50s, but like not much happens up there. Like he's just there.
Right.
Right. He hasn't developed the personas that are kind of reliant on that pose. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. It's really strange. And then we have this amazing letter, which I included in the exhibition too. It's from 1960, and it's to a fan who has obviously written and asked Schulz, who does Snoopy belong to? And he says he's a neighborhood dog. He doesn't belong to anybody.
Oh.
By 1960.
That's wild.
He's like, well, Charlie Brown has taken up most of his, care, but really he just belongs. He just, he gets a bite of food here and an insult there, and he's just in the neighborhood, and it's just like,
that's interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We were looking at, and it was clear at the beginning that it wasn't his dog. But it's very difficult to pinpoint the part where he does become his dog officially.
Yeah.
Right.
But Charlie Brown's the responsible one. Maybe it's just, he's the one that day in and day out. So Benjamin, I wanted to ask you, since you're just putting up all of these strips from the 50s, was the size that he drew those strips consistent all the way through the 50s? He hadn't changed the size of his drawing. Are they all pretty much the same size in the exhibition when
There
up on the
may
walls?
be might be a tiny difference in about 54 where they go just, but it is, we're talking.
He's working huge, right?
Maximum half an inch, quarter inch. It's nothing. And maybe just like a hair taller than wider, or, it's like, it's,
yeah.
I think there's a couple changes in there, but they're really small.
Yeah, we were in the 70s. I was trying to kind of pinpoint the moment when things shifted and changed, because it looks like he had such a long, not shallow strip for so long as that Space Saver. Mm-hmm. And then when he became really popular and the newspapers were constantly shrinking, it looked like it made sense that, he should get the height back that most of the other strips had, because he was losing his real estate on the newspaper page because of the shrinking strip. And so it's been fun trying to pinpoint, where does this shift, or even just looking at, the artwork. If you're using the same tools, but you're working smaller, then your line's going to get thicker, and, it's going to have a different feel, and how that affects the strip is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Overall it's not, just in the 50s, it's not much of a difference, but you're right. There are some, and I think we've got the dates for those when
you do.
They would write and say, hey, as of March 1st, we got to switch the formats up again because, for whatever reason. So,
yeah. It was a big moment when he no longer had that Peanuts bar in the upper left-hand corner of the daily strips, and he could use the entire first panel. That changes aesthetically what you do, just that one thing.
Yeah. What he was really happy about was when he finally could just do pre-printed blanks. Because
was that?
He was hand ruling them, for
really
way longer than I kind of anticipated. I think into like late 53.
Wow.
He's drawing every single panel frame.
Huh. And then I guess he had to go back to that, I guess, when he went into the variable panel dailies.
Yeah, his blanks were just one big, just the outer.
Yeah, and then you just white out the edges.
You just white it out and rule them down if you needed to. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Benjamin, I have a question.
Yeah.
What were the quotation marks around the peanuts? what was that from?
Who knows? I have no idea. Nobody knows that now.
It's wondering, it was Schultz's way of saying, yeah, it's peanuts.
Peanuts. Yeah, no, who knows? No idea. Because they printed them, because those were pre-printed.
Mm-hmm.
He could cut, they were like on newsprint.
Yeah.
And he'd have, sheets of them, and he could cut them out, paste them on.
Right.
But yeah, they went from the quotes to the no quote. I'm sure they dropped the quotes just because it's cleaner looking.
Yeah.
I don't think the quotes were really that deliberate of a choice, frankly. But I think dropping them.
People loved quotes back then. I used to get birthday cards from my parents, literally, that would say happy birthday in quotes. And I would think, what is that about? I got one that said to our son. And son was in quotes. What is going on here?
Yeah. Start questioning.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Well, Jimmy's theory is that anything put in quotation marks is twice as funny.
Yeah. Absolutely. Unnecessary quotation.
And then you have newspapers that are adding their own typographical titles onto all the strips. So sometimes it's like doubled up. So it says peanuts and then peanuts in the strip, and
yeah. And they misspelled Schultz's name for like decades in newspapers.
Oh, yeah. One of my very favorites is I have a clipping where it's attributed to Schultz is misspelled. And it's not just Schultz that's misspelled. It's attributed to someone named Frank Schultz.
What?
And,
wow.
I love that.
His nephew, Frank.
Now we know who the ghostwriter was.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most flattering moments of my life is when you posted on Twitter that you went to the archives and pulled a piece of original art because we were discussing it on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And it was,
thank you.
Do you remember what it was? It was the wide-eyed Charlie Brown at the fair.
Oh, I think I've even done it another time since then, too.
Oh, wow. Very exciting.
Yeah, the wide-eyed at the fair. Because it was like, because in print, you're like, oh, it could just be like,
is it
over 8? I mean, like, who knows? Like that.
Yeah.
Be, but no, it was very deliberate. It's like it's just that that fraction of a millimeter, that Schulz did. It's just like, oh, he did that on purpose. His eyes are meant to look, dilated, and it's wild. But no, there was another time you guys were discussing Charlie Brown's in the bathtub, and there's a tile surround, and you had wondered if he had hand drawn that, or if it was a Zipatone pattern or something. And no, he drew it. So
wow.
Do you see many paste overs at all in the strip, like where he would literally take a fresh piece of Bristol board or paper and cover something, or was he always just working on the Bristol board with either some white, some opaque white? And because I don't think I've ever seen something with a paste over in an original. At an exhibit.
It's pretty rare. Yeah, he's working straight on. It's actually Strathmore paper, and then for the whole run, and then 3-ply Strathmore, and then he.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask how many ply, but I thought, don't be obnoxious, Jimmy.
3-ply Strathmore, and
secrets are revealed.
And there's a few. One that springs to mind is it's in the 50s, and Schroeder is conducting to the radio. And the radio, it's not like a super complex drawing, but for some reason he had them photostatted, like 3 or 4 times. So 3 times, and he pasted them on.
Wow. And the musical staffs, was that always lined? It's so pristine.
Yeah, always hand drawn.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty confident in that. There might be like something in the 90s, because he would fool around with Xeroxes in the 90s a bit. There's one where Charlie Brown's having like a dream sequence and about dance class. And the girl has said, I want to dance with you, and he's having, and it's like all like higgledy-piggledy on there, and that's all Xerox. So I think by the 90s he's doing that a bit. Just to, it's getting harder for him. And,
right. Yeah.
So I think he's doing that to save some time. He also just, he liked it. He liked how it looked.
Yeah.
I know that sequence you're talking about, and he experiments with the art a lot in that. That's where you kind of see, like in the distance, it's like a crosshatch. So they look like almost like they're faded out dancing and stuff. It's really wild.
Yeah.
We talk about the fact that, we're getting to the point now where you're starting to see the hand tremor and stuff. And all of that could be so easily fixed today if you're drawing on a Cintiq or you're drawing on a iPad or whatever. But it's not fixing it. It's taking, I want to see, I don't want to see that poor guy suffer, but I want to see my hero make this artwork, which I still love and is still beautiful.
Yeah.
I think people are, I think we're not going to get to see much of that in the future, unfortunately.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's pretty incredible to see an artist age with their work, which we can see so easily with Schulz because his work is so consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that subtlety over time, the evolution of the characters, but also his expression within that is really fascinating. There's 50 years of output practically, and especially if you go back, pre-Peanuts, it's over 50 years. So it's really remarkable. It's something very special. And this daily work, it's a day by day by day by day.
Yeah, right.
It's wild.
How many artists do we have a record of that sort of thing?
How many people can you say, hey, what did you do for the last 50 years? And you can point to a shelf and go, there it is. There's 50 years.
It's pretty amazing.
That's wild.
Yeah. I have one other technical question for, well, maybe not just one, knowing me, but
I'll do my best.
When you look at a 50s daily and you look at a late 90s daily, again, it's a size question. What size is that late 90s strip in relationship to that 50s daily strip? Is it significantly smaller? It seems like it might.
Yeah, it's 3/4 maybe. That 90s strip. Roughly. Like it might be a little, those 90s strips might actually technically be a little taller than the 50s dailies.
Yeah, right.
Just by a bit. Again, we're talking under an inch.
Do you have any clues as to when he might, when he maybe made things smaller? Do you see if it looks like he switched tools? Like, as I know he used to have a Speedball 6 and 5 and 4. Yeah, obviously the Radio 9 14 pen he was drawing with, that's not changing.
No.
It's just going to look what it looks like at the size you draw.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have a thicker line, little bolder line. There's nothing you can do about it, really, right?
Yeah. No, he never changed tools at all, ever.
Is there any record of him being annoyed or not annoyed about having to change the size, or was that just part of the gig? Or do we not know?
Don't know. I think he just probably saw it as part of the gig.
Yeah.
I imagine he would have been annoyed about it. I mean, he was more, it wasn't so much the size of the drawing. Like, he just hated how it was reproduced.
Right.
And if some papers, really cinched down on it and got it down to just the most minimal printing size possible, like, he didn't like that. He knew who was doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Or who was dropping Sunday panels out just willy-nilly.
Yeah.
But I think, was he critical of Gary Trudeau when Trudeau required his strip to be printed a certain size? I kind of remember that he wasn't on board with that because he didn't like the idea that editors were forced to place the thing in a certain way because an artist required it.
Yeah, I mean,
that was in the 80s, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Schulz saw like that, in his understanding of, the cartoonist relationship to papers, it was like, our job as cartoonists is to put out the best strip we can.
Yeah.
And those editors, they're running their newspapers, but I mean, he took his own stance too. I mean, when he gets a letter from editor in Mississippi in 1971 saying, hey, we don't like the race mixing going on. And he's just like, listen, this is it. This is what I'm doing. And you can either drop the strip or whatever. So, I mean, he had his own demands and
Well, one of my favorite quotes of his is, well, either you print it exactly how I drew it or I quit.
Yeah.
I would get a tattoo of that. I would love that. I think that would be every cartoonist's motto.
Yeah.
Right. He knew the power he wielded at a certain point, and often he seemed to defer that to the editors, but other times, it was important enough for him to say, hey, I'm going to put my foot down here. Like the licensing thing. I think we know that at some point he thought that was getting out of hand, and he's like, it's going to take up more of his time to have to manage all the stuff that must have been crossing his desk while he's trying to do a comic strip.
Oh yeah, definitely. And why he, eventually, probably later than he should have, hired put together a team of people to help him do that and manage that. And he was doing it all himself, or trying.
That's amazing.
And the thing is like the syndicate, like nobody had done anything at that scale, So like the syndicate was like they didn't feel like they should be giving up that right, to him necessarily, but they're like, well, but he does, draw the thing, and they're basing characters off of, what he draws. And so it was really uneven, he would sometimes a lot of approval, and it depends on the relationship he had with that licensee too. There's a great letter I think it's in the early 60s. Eagle brand pencils wants him to, be a spokesman for Eagle brand pencils. And they offer a licensing deal and, to UFS, and Schulz writes back to them, and they run it by him, and he's just like, I don't care. He's like, I don't use their pencils, but I mean, I could. He's like, I don't know. Are you guys really that hard up? Like, we could split the $100. So like, I don't care. I'll say it if you want me to. At that point, he's so financially successful too. Like, he doesn't have to jump on everything, and he's just like, but he's kind of shoots it back to them. It's like, if you guys are that hard up, you want the $50 that you get out of it. Fine. I'll say I use their pencils. They can send me stuff.
Yeah. Benjamin, do you know much of the history of the United Feature Syndicate and how Schulz fit into that? Because they were not like the biggest syndicate. They had some big hits. Was Lil Abner United Feature?
Yeah.
But they weren't like King
and Nancy
features.
Yeah,
and Nancy, right? But they were certainly a player.
Yeah.
But it seems like Schulz took them to the top. I mean, King was like the king. King Features. But it seems like Schulz changed things forever for United Feature. They obviously must have been aware
Yeah,
how important that is.
They were well aware of that.
and then you hear the stories of some of the trepidation from the people who were assigned to Schulz, that it's like, if oh my gosh, I ticked him off.
Yeah,
I changed something in the strip, or I should, and we didn't ask permission, and boy, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to some employees, that go back to back to the 70s. It's about who's left now, and they always talk about like, oh, Sparky, use hushed tones. It's like, like it is like need to know information at a certain like very high level, like lower level employees have no idea what's going on. They don't talk to them. Like they don't.
Wow.
His business is only discussed at the highest levels.
Wow.
Well, I could see why, if you were the one that did something that just was the perfect thing to not make him happy, I could see why you would be very nervous about this.
I was watching a YouTube video a while ago that was about something completely unrelated. It was a lecture on the Old Testament from the 60s. And the guy who's doing the lecture just casually says, well, like Al Cap says, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, that's amazing. Everyone in that audience knew who Al Cap was. I think today, most people could name one cartoonist and it would only be Charles Schulz. Right? I mean, no, certainly you could not just say, even Gary Trudeau or someone in just a casual conversation about some unrelated topic. I don't think you could assume people would know who that is. When people come to the museum, what percentage are coming because they're Schulz fans? I mean, not the real number, but what's your sense of that are like hardcore fans of this person, and how much are people saying, I love Peanuts, the experience, or the brand, or whatever you call it?
I have no idea, but I mean, I definitely don't have numbers,
right.
But my sense of it is that, the larger proportion would be fans of the characters. They might be aware of Charles Schulz, but they might not be able to pick him out of a crowd, which is why, why the work we do here specifically, even as opposed to like our satellite museum in Tokyo, we really focus on centering him in our stories and what we do.
Quick question. When they run the strip in Japan, is it right to left?
No, it's left to right.
Oh, okay. So I thought the manga thing was always right to left, but was that something that was
no,
brought
not
up?
always. At least when I've seen it, it's left to right.
Uh-huh.
That's not to say. Actually, I think I've seen it vertical.
That would make it.
Those are old.
Yeah.
Those are pre 1988.
Back when it was 4 panels all the time.
Yeah. So no, I think I've usually seen it left to right, and usually with Japanese translation underneath.
Okay.
So they don't read.
Well, I guess that is the thing. In the translations we have now, the purists are reading the direction of the Japanese comics to try to have as close to the true experience as possible. So I guess they're doing the same for Peanuts.
Yeah.
What characters in Japan seem to have the most resonance? Like at that museum, is there a greater emphasis on character? Obviously less on Schulz, but is Snoopy or Woodstock or Charlie Brown resonating more there, or do you have a sense of that?
Oh yeah, Snoopy. I mean, it's called Snoopy Museum. I mean, it's
okay.
Snoopy, definitely. But yeah, some of the other characters do. A lot of the animal characters, really resonate.
Isn't that interesting?
Even Faron, who's such a minor character, is really popular in Japan.
Is there a stuffed Faron somewhere?
There is.
Oh.
I don't know if he's still being made. It might be out of print, as it were. There has been Faron merch, in Japan. So it's just
that's cool.
Which is just
wow.
like, why? But,
he makes a nice scarf, I would think.
Yeah, right. A little stole, little Faron stole.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Like
amazing. I remember doing the comic book called Apathy Cat. It was a straight, funny animal comic in the mid-'90s. And I remember meeting somebody at San Diego Comic-Con who was with, it was like a Japanese collective of publishers who had come to exhibit there. And when I showed them Apathy Cat, they said, in Japanese culture, they will not accept a talking animal. And I was like, well, Peanuts is over. Yeah, but I guess it's because he was a thinking animal that he got away with it. And Hello Kitty, I heard, is actually officially a little girl who looks like a cat. So they had ways around it.
Okay.
But culturally, they said they would not accept a set of talking animals. That was not, at the time, something that they said could be published or accepted.
What's funny is Schulz didn't either. Because when they were initially talking about, he and Lee Mendelsohn and Bill Melendez sit down and they're hashing out what is a Peanuts animated project, something that's more than, the Ford commercials,
Right.
these little spots, it's like, okay, we gotta fill half an hour. It's like, how are we going to do this? And they talked about, I can't remember if it was Lee or Bill had said something to him about, well, we're going to have to be very careful with who we choose to voice Snoopy. And Schulz was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, like, he's an important character. Like, do we want an adult? Like, or do we want, because they'd had the conversation about the kids, being voiced by real kids, which was already just like a wild idea. And so, and he's like, oh no, Snoopy doesn't talk. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like
yeah.
Oh no, I mean, you read his thoughts, but that's it. He doesn't talk. He's like, dogs don't talk. And it's just like, okay.
Yeah, I would not have expected that. Would have floored me if I was if I had been in that room, because I would think of, well, of course Schulz wants us to know Snoopy's thoughts in animation,
right?
Whether that was Jim never asked for a second cup of coffee at my house with the little resonant thing of the thought. That's what I thought he would have gone with, because that's a huge loss.
It is.
Strip,
but,
not hear Snoopy's thoughts.
Yeah,
but it's it's the right decision. Could you imagine if they got like Jonathan Winters or something?
Fernando,
like no, that would have been horrible.
Yeah.
He just had the sense that was the way to go, even though he was silencing.
Well, that's probably Dom DeLuise wasn't available at the time. So
we did not need any of that.
Yeah,
no.
But that's why in animation, Snoopy does a lot more typing.
Yeah,
right.
There's ways around it, but they had to get creative. And
well, to see that Garfield did go there, and got a distinctive voice that now is in everybody's head.
Yeah.
There must be some power to not having an official voice to Snoopy, where everybody has their own idea of what Snoopy maybe sounds like.
Yeah.
Garfield found a way to get away with it, but at the same time, it seems like somehow the Peanuts stuff is more transcendent than.
But we know what he sounds like. Curse us foiled again.
Yeah, I have that Bill Melendez, squawk, kind of in my head, which was only recorded as a placeholder. That was just that was not deliberate. He said, well, we have to have something for the kids to cue off of, and he recorded a couple, growls and ruffs and they were playing with it, and Schulz was like, oh, I like that. Let's just do that.
Wow. Yeah, it grows on you, I guess, after a while when you hear something over and over. It's like, well, that's what it is now.
Yeah.
So, Benjamin, looking here at 2024, what are you most excited about in the Peanuts world?
Oh my goodness! Of course, we have a full slate of really exciting exhibitions coming up this spring. I'm excited for Cowabunga. It's a surfing themed exhibition here at the Schulz Museum. It's gonna be a lot of fun. We're doing some early production stuff now, and I'm loving how it's turning out. It's looking so much. It's looking so good. I'm doing another entry in my evolution series, so we're looking at 1960s.
Oh, great!
And that's been fun to put together too.
Has anyone ever done a little? I would really like to see an evolution animation. If someone could like grab panels of Snoopy and just string them all together so you can just sit there and watch him grow and his nose, his snout grow and stuff. To me, that's really fascinating because it really, especially in the 50s, because it was happening so fast.
Yeah, that would be fun to put together. Yoshi Otani did a work like that, which is on permanent display here. It's carved in wood. And it takes you from Spike, from that Ripley's Believe It or Not drawing all the way to, Snoopy in 1999. So it's it does a lot of that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to do it like panel by panel, like in the strip.
Yeah, if you could morph it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you the one that decides on all the actual what the exhibits are going to be? Do you get carte blanche?
No, I don't get carte blanche, but
nobody gets carte blanche, I imagine.
No, unfortunately, yeah, I've got some ideas tucked away for like someday,
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a process we go through. I present slates of exhibitions, run a couple years worth by a committee of people, and we hash them out and move them around, or I get sent back to the drawing board occasionally. So
when I was there, it was Snoopy Goes to the Moon, because it was the anniversary of the moon landing. And to see those strips in that place, honestly, if you are listening to this podcast, here's what you do. Next time you get one of them, their credit card offers, you just accept it and you immediately book a ticket, Santa Rosa. But you've got to go and you've got to see this place. You can see the do you eat at the Warm Puppy?
I do occasionally, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, take my kiddo over there and have go ice skating, and then he wants a pig pen hot chocolate where they put the Oreo dust on it, and and yeah, occasionally grab lunch there too. Yeah, they do some good fries. So.
Yeah, it's such a magical place. You really feel like you're just connected to the Peanuts world and to Schulz himself, and it's wonderful. So if anyone can go there, please do. It's amazing.
It's great. Benjamin, could I ask you a question that came up, I think, internally? I don't know if one of our listeners asked it. I think, Liz, you posed it anyway to us. The question of how Schulz wrote. Was it all in his head until it wound up in pencil on the Bristol board, or was there an interim? Do we know if there was an interim where he was working through wording and separately and then it transfers? Or?
So he would warm up. That's kind of what he would say. It started out on, he had like these little pads of paper. Sometimes they were like this size, like a quarter sheet pad. We have a couple of those. There's not many of those around. Where he's just like, he'd come at it a couple different ways. Sometimes he's just doodling a funny pose. There's one, here we go. Here, this is a great example. I'm using this in an exhibition, that surfing one, Cowabunga, this spring. We have Snoopy launching out of a bird bath with teeth bared at a frightened Woodstock. This is on one of these little quarter sheets, and it's just a quick little doodle, and it just says shark. Well, of course, that becomes a strip, in the summer of like 1975. So Sparky has gone to see Jaws, obviously,
right,
and it has stuck in his head, and he's got this funny idea, and so he says it all the time. Like, cartooning is drawing funny pictures,
right.
Right.
And so he would start there often, just a funny pose. What if Snoopy is jumping out of the bird bath? It's shallow, but it's funny. And another one is as Woodstock is in his nest and just like looking pleased with himself, like lying back and just like enjoying himself. And he's on a skateboard. The nest is on a skateboard and it's zooming by, and that's it. That's the whole drawing. But he would have that, and then he would go straight to the Strathmore paper on his drawing board, and
amazing.
And it would come.
That is amazing.
And then in later years, though, we have a lot more of this from like 98, 99 is when they knew the museum was going to exist, and his assistant at the time, Edna, who just recently passed away, actually. She would collect at the end of the day, she'd empty his wastebaskets, and he had legal pads. So he'd kind of moved on from like the little sheets to like legal pads.
Okay.
And on those, we see more words. So he's playing with phrases.
Okay.
He's working out the dialogue. You'll see like 4 lines, and those are the 4 panels. There might be a pencil doodle of Peppermint Patty and her hair is going wild.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all there is. And it's just the faintest little thing. And whether he drew the drawing first or did the
Mhm.
words first, we don't know.
Do you think he did that in earlier years and we just don't have those?
Yeah.
Or do you feel like, so you think he maybe was roughing out a little, little grid of 4 or whatever on a piece of paper or however he was doing it, and maybe there were words that he's putting with the pictures before he goes to actually transfer it to the
no
panel?
grid, no nothing. I mean, it's just
No grid.
It's just
Okay, yeah.
line. It's just like scribbled lines, and they are really hard to decipher.
Yeah.
Myself and a couple other staff people who we look at this stuff all day, and
Right.
we are very familiar with his handwriting, and
Yeah.
even we kind of go back and forth, like, is it this? Does it say that? And then because we're trying to
Right.
match it to a strip, because sometimes they match them up, and then sometimes we can't. There is no strip.
When you match it up, do you often see that he significantly changed the wording from what you can see, or it's
No.
pretty much whole?
Yep.
That's amazing.
It's
And I have another technical question for you, Benjamin, and that is, a lot of cartoonists we know who used Bristol board, because it's a fairly thick cardstock, right?
Mhm.
It's not opaque, though, if you put light through it. A lot of artists would light box something. They might turn it over on the back, and they might do pencils, and then they would run it on a light box so they could trace something a little harder, or they were trying to see if the drawing held up well if you did it, flipped over. And so maybe if you did something slightly wonky, a lot of artists would do that as a way to kind of perfect their drawings. Do you ever see any images on the back of the Bristol board that he worked from?
Never.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah.
You see that American Masters documentary, and finally, that is where I remember seeing him drawing with the 914. And maybe because it was drawn on film, and I know they used to do this as a trick on old live TV, maybe there was the faintest conceivable pencil line that he's following. But the eye of the camera, or whatever, man, he puts that pen down. Woof, it's just
on the strips. There is pencil. We see it more in the 50s, where he'll pencil in. And often he'll do the dialogue. He'll pencil in. It's just like scribble, 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 and it's about the length. He's just probably talking to himself in his head. He's probably just reading it to himself in his head. Good grief. He just good grief. It's that long, and then he's blocking in the heads, so he gets the proportions right. That's it. And then it's to ink.
Wow.
He gives, because he's a letterer,
first and foremost, really, right?
Practically, yeah.
Right.
And so he's giving himself enough room for his word balloons. So he blocks out the lettering, and then he's blocking in the heads, and then he can work from that.
So like Snoopy's doghouse, if Snoopy's on top of his doghouse, which is so common, in would you just see the pencils of like Snoopy's head, or would he outline the doghouse, or how would he do that?
Yeah, you might get a little bit like the outline of the doghouse. You'll get, maybe if Snoopy's like lying, you might get the nose, the belly, the feet, and that's it.
Right, that's it.
And then he's off to the races. And even in that case, you probably don't even get that. You probably just get the dialogue in that, in pencil on that, and that's it.
Wow.
Because we see that more, because we have we've got a few abandoned strips, and sometimes
really
you'll see what he's done is he hasn't, and it's usually oftentimes it's lettering. It's I need 4 lines to really make this hit right. I can't just do it in 3, as it gets too squished. I can move this piece of dialogue into the next panel and not lose anything. Wow. But I need it for the drawing in the 3rd panel, because I'm doing something big and crazy, and I want the drawing to get the full, as much space as it can.
Did you ever see an abandoned strip that became a Sunday, that was a daily, because he realized he couldn't fit it?
No.
Okay.
Never seen that. I think he went into a whole different headspace for Sundays. He did them separate. They're on a totally different schedule, for one thing.
Right.
So he's not really able to carry over storylines very often. He did it a little bit, but it's rare.
Yeah, very rarely.
Because it's on a whole other schedule, and I think he just kind of had to go to a different headspace for those.
Mm-hmm.
There is an example of where the Syndicate, where he sent in a Sunday, and they're like, no.
Really?
trim it down to a daily, and he did that a couple times.
Now, why would they do that? I mean,
well, one of them is a Linus. He's watching a single leaf fall, and he did it on a Sunday, so it's like 12 panels of a leaf falling.
Yeah,
and it happens, and I think I figured out it might have been like the timing lines up where like Amy or Jill would have just been born.
Oh,
so I got a newborn in the house. He's on a schedule.
There was a ridiculous sitcom in the 90s called Caroline in the City that was about a newspaper cartoonist. But they knew nothing about it. It was like the next day's strip was due,
right? And
she overslept, and it was one of the funniest cartooning jokes ever. It's okay, I got it. Caroline's in a blackout. Black, black, black. Yeah, I totally understand that.
I'm surprised that the syndicate would push back. No, I don't. I guess that's fairly early on.
Yeah,
I'm surprised that they would have pushed back and said, "No, we don't deem this acceptable." That's a surprise to me that they would have done that.
They did that early on. In fact, I've got some in this exhibition from the 50s. It's like when Schroeder was introduced, and we have 2 dailies. I mean, they have dates. They're folded. You know, they were obviously sent in, but they never ran. And
and we
don't know why. Except they're kind of repetitive. They're a little bit repetitive.
Repetitive internally, you mean? Like the leaf falling forever? Or
no.
The joke that's been told before?
Yeah, it's, baby Schroeder is crying and he doesn't come with a manual or, whatever. And, and like, they're they're good jokes. I mean, but you kind of look at the week leading up to it. It's like, oh yeah, maybe that's the only thing I can come up with.
Right. I mean, it's that early on. Obviously, Schulz is not Schulz yet, and there are editors.
Well, and editors have to do something.
Yeah, and editors, that is their job, is to help you make something special and grow into something special. I mean, Bill Watterson and Calvin and Hobbes, he told stories about how a good editor was like, okay, focus on these 2 characters. You got a huge family. This is what's special. And where a good editor really will bring out the best in you. And maybe at that point in Schulz's career, he was very appreciative to get some feedback from someone before it goes out. Right?
He definitely was. We have a little bit of correspondence with him in the syndicate. He'd say like, "Oh, I hope you like this better." So.
And who was his main contact at the syndicate early on? How long like the guy who bought it, or there's obviously a group that agreed on it. Was he with someone for a fair period of time?
Oh yeah,
as continuity from the beginning.
Very much, yeah. He worked pretty close with like Jim Hennessy, who's there, and then that name Hennessy shows up in the strip too. And
right.
Yeah, he did that kind of not often, but every once in a while he would do shout outs like that, right?
Yeah.
Do you know, Benjamin, who Olivier is?
Oh,
one of the birds is named Olivier. Yeah, why?
I don't know that one. I don't know if it's Laurence Olivier, because it's, he's thinking about these grand adventures, and, and he was a film buff.
Yeah.
So,
right.
That's my guess, but it is a guess. And
well, that bird was Oliver to me for 40 years. I just noticed that it was Olivier.
Yeah,
that was wild.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good to ask because I did an exhibition about all those name origins and things, and then after I did it, it's about to close, and like somebody's like, I think Monty Schulz came by and said, "Oh, you forgot so and so." It's like, oh my god, it's like, where were you? A year ago when I was asking all that,
It's so cool to speak with you and to talk with somebody who's living this legacy and constantly digging into it and exploring. It's obviously what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Oh, you guys do a beautiful job. I love tuning into Unpacking Peanuts because I learn things, or you ask good questions too, which is my favorite thing. So it's
well, thank you.
You bring knowledge to it. So it's and all your varying perspectives too, which is really helpful, and the multi-generational aspect too.
Aw, that's amazing. That's so great to hear.
Well, thank you so much for having me on again. It was a real pleasure, and I hope to come back for a 3-peat.
That would be fantastic.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Benjamin.
I would just love to thank Benjamin Clark for coming here and talking with us today. It's always so great to hear his insight into the strip, into the work that goes on at that museum. Again, if you can go see it, please do. It's a magical place. So thanks to Benjamin. We're coming back next week, and we have special guest Gary Groth, publisher of Fantagraphics and publisher of The Complete Peanuts. So be there. So until then, for Michael, Harold, and Liz, this is Jimmy. Be of good cheer.
Yes.
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 Be of good cheer.
Unpacking Peanuts is copyright Jimmy Gownley, Michael Cohen, and Harold Buchholz. Produced and edited by Liz Sumner. Music by Michael Cohen. Additional voiceover by Aziza Shakrala Clark. For more from the show, follow Unpack Peanuts on Instagram and Threads. Unpacking Peanuts on Facebook, Blue Sky, and YouTube. For more about Jimmy, Michael, and Harold, visit unpackingpeanuts.com. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.
Triumphant.